My name's Jenny McGarry and I have Meniere's disease. I'm currently 54 and I have had Meniere's disease since I was 20. So I guess it's a pretty long story. I'll try and make it brief but informative so that I guess there's a few things about Meniere's disease that I think are really important for people to know, especially when they're just new, they've just got Meniere's disease. So when I had my first vertigo attack, I was 20 and I had an abstract idea about what vertigo was. I thought it was just a bit of dizziness. Of course, I had no idea that it meant that everything spins around really, really fast. And so that was a big shock. I had no idea what had happened to me. In terms of my vertigo attacks, I was very fortunate in that they didn't, the actual spinning vertigo, the fast spinning vertigo did not last very long at all. It was only a matter of a couple of minutes and then it would stop. However, after that, it would be hours before I was actually able to walk or move again without really bad vomiting, basically not being able to walk, staggering. So I guess when I later heard about other people's experiences with the really bad spinning, I realized how lucky I was and how fortunate I was that even though I was out of action for hours afterwards, I was still not having that continual spinning, which is really horrible. I guess for me, the reason I found it difficult to explain what happened to me was because even though I no longer had the spinning happening, I basically didn't have any balance. It was impossible to focus or concentrate on anything. You feel like you can't see, like my eyes would feel like they were moving, that even though I was trying to look at one place, it felt like I had no control over what my eyes were doing. And that, of course, in turn made me feel sick and would vomit. So it was a really horrible feeling, and not something that I felt that even when the doctor said to me, well, what do you think happened? I found it really hard to explain. So I had my first attack. It went away. I thought, oh, well, might have been a bug or something. I actually saw a doctor who told me that he thought I might have had pneumonia, but subsequent tests showed I didn't have anything like that. I just kind of went, oh, well, these things happen, and that was it. But what actually happened after that was within a couple of weeks, I had another vertigo attack. And it was the same thing. I would get the initial, very fast rotary spinning, and then I would basically not be able to walk. I'd stagger around, I'd be vomiting, just really, really horrible. And usually it would last about 4 to 8 hours. So I'd be out of action for about 4 to 8 hours. So it wasn't until a couple of months in that my sister noticed that I really couldn't hear properly. And that wasn't something that I'd picked up. The thing I'd picked up that was really weird was that I could hear the fridge humming when I was in the backyard. And I thought that was really strange. I'm hanging up washing at the bottom of the backyard and I can hear the fridge, which of course in turn was tinnitus. And so I didn't put all these things together until I actually saw an ENT specialist who went into what actually was happening and said that we'll do some tests on your balance, we'll do tests on your hearing, and by the sounds of things, you have Meniere's disease. So that's exactly what happened. I had the tests. They found that I had hearing loss in my right ear. And I was basically told that really there's nothing that can be done. I was told that it's strange because it's normally only men over 40 who get Meniere's disease, so they couldn't quite understand why I had it. And I was basically told, look, you're just going to have to go home and learn to live with it. Wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but that's just the way it is. So that kind of made life really difficult, because I had no information. This, of course, was before the internet, before we have all these really wonderful supports that we do have now online and on Facebook and on the web. So I really had no one to turn to, and I didn't know any other sufferers. So it was sort of like I basically had to just put up and learn to cope with it. So this actually became really problematic because I was having vertigo attacks, a couple of times a week. And what had happened was that after a few months, my tinnitus never went away, and the pressure in my ear never went away. And my hearing loss was fluctuating all the time. So I never had warning. I never knew. I didn't have a louder ringing. I didn't have, worse pressure. I just had a vertigo attack, and it became a problem with my job. It just became a problem with my life, basically. And I kind of went, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, how am I supposed to live? How do you do this? So I actually sought help through a journalist with just the local newspaper. And I had an article in the newspaper and that talked about my Meniere's disease. Some of the information wasn't quite right. For example, the journalist noted that I passed out, which I never passed out as in losing consciousness. But, I was unable to get up, for example, and move about. So that was actually a turning point for me, because a lot of people got in contact with me, and most of them were really lovely, and they rang me. I had one guy, he was a long distance truck driver, and he'd started having really bad vertigo attacks. He basically had no livelihood, and he discovered it was an allergy. So when he actually removed that from his diet, he was fine again. I spoke to people who'd had their endolymphatic sac removed, or they'd had the nerve cut. I spoke to people who had symptoms because of accidents, for example, slipping on a wet floor, landing on your bottom, and the pressure blew out their ear. That's how the lady described it. But it actually gave me a lot of options to look at to see if I could help myself in terms of controlling my symptoms. So I went on a very sort of long journey then. I had full allergy testing done, and I was found not to really be allergic to anything. I tried a hypoglycemic diet because some of the symptoms are close to what they say you suffer with hypoglycemia. I also had acupuncture because a doctor I was seeing, he said, well, acupuncture might help, but unfortunately for me, it didn't. I did see a naturopath. I was put on a series of taking garlic and horseradish, a concentrated high dose garlic and horseradish, because I was told that might help to clear out the blockage in my ears. Like, that was another theory, was that it was a build-up of stuff in your ears. It would drain everything out and keep you well, but unfortunately that didn't work. A few months before my first vertigo attack, I'd had a very bad golden staph on my face. And so one of my doctors said, well, is it possible that that affected your ear? So I was put on really strong antibiotics for a few months. And of course, that made no difference either. So I did try a number of alternative things, but I was also given Meniere and Lasix, which are diuretics, and they were helpful, and following a low salt diet. But I think that I just got sicker and sicker. And I think in retrospect, I was following a very low salt diet. and I was having a high dose of diuretics. And I think that basically it set up an imbalance in my body, and it made me quite sick. So I ended up losing a lot of weight. I got down to about 44 kilos, and I felt very, very unwell. So that was a really, really low point for me. I was still having vertigo attacks. So I went to see a specialist in the city, and he said, look, we could do the cut your nerve, the balance nerve. Like, I don't really think you're that bad compared to other people I've seen, but we could cut your balance nerve, give you back, your life, and that would be fine. And having spoken to these people, and I realized that that would not be a good option for me. So I actually stopped taking the diuretics. I stayed on a low salt diet. I didn't drink coffee or tea. I didn't drink alcohol, anything like that. Got a lot of rest, and gradually I did get better, but it took a lot. It took a while, and then suddenly I went into remission, and I was like, well, maybe I imagined all this. I don't really have Meniere's disease. This was all. It was just, a terrible, terrible dream. It was a nightmare, and it's over. And I'd had my first son, while I was really sick with Meniere's. So thankfully, during my pregnancy, I was okay. But after I had him, when he was about 2 months old, the vertigo attacks became very regular and frequent. And I was then also put on Circ, or betahistine. And so I had to stop breastfeeding, and I took Circ. So I guess even with the medication, it just didn't seem to totally help me. But there wasn't a lot of other options open to me to do. So I went into remission. I was really glad. I thought, well, that's a horrible part of my life's over. And I was good for about 4 years. And then I had another vertigo attack. And I kind of realized, I'm back to where I was. It is true. It is true. I was just in remission. So I was seeing Professor Gibson at Royal Prince Alfred in the city in Sydney. And I'd also seen Professor Fagan, who was another specialist. I had further testing done. My left ear has always been good. No balance issues, no hearing issues. It's always just been my right ear. So this time, when it started up again, I was put on Sturgeon, and that made a big difference. I found that was really great. Initially, I found it difficult getting used to the medication because it makes you very, very tired, and because I was taking it 3 times a day. But once my body got used to that, I actually went really well with Sturgeon. And so it was like a lifesaver for the next few years. It was great. But then it started not to work so well. And apparently with antihistamines, which Sturgeon is sort of like an antihistamine-based kind of a drug, that can happen. So basically I had to decide, what was I going to do? Professor Gibson gave me an injection of steroid into my ear. And that was really, really one of the most painful things I've ever had done. I don't know why, because I think I've heard lots of people have it and they've never had a problem. But for me, I was just in agony for hours afterwards, just real pain. I ended up going to my doctor and she gave me 2 shots, like of painkillers, to try to help with the pain. So it was pretty bad. And I sort of thought, I'm kind of at a crossroads here, because do I want to go back to having a life where I just stay home and wait for an attack to happen, because I really was not going to have any warning, which was the case. I My tinnitus was the same as it had been. And that was one interesting thing, was that when I was in remission, I still had tinnitus. That tinnitus never went, and the fullness never went. So the hearing loss, I think, still fluctuated, but I definitely just did not have vertigo attacks. So I guess even though I was telling myself it's over, I think a part of me probably knew I've still got these symptoms. So, maybe it's just not all okay. So I was seeing Professor Gibson, and I had started doing some reading about gentamicin, and I was quite interested in the thought that gentamicin would kill off the balance nerve in a less destructive way than having surgery. It would also take the rest of my hearing, but I mean, I was already having hearing loss. So I thought it might be the way to go. And I actually had it done at St Vincent's Hospital, and I had it done through Professor Fagan. So the operation itself was day surgery, and at that time, so this was back in 2003. So it's a long time ago. It was at the very beginning of the kind of gentamicin treatment. So the way in which it was administered was on a very tiny, tiny little swab that had been soaked in gentamicin, and my eardrum was ruptured so that they could then place that soaked swab into my middle ear, and the idea is that it then gradually moves it gets soaked into your inner ear and kills off the balance and the hearing nerve. So Dr. Fagan had already done this same procedure on a number of other people, and he said some of them were back at work in 2 weeks. I was not so lucky. I found it very difficult after the operation. I had sort of really, really bad vertigo for a while. Not that day. That day I was fine. I had the day surgery. I went home. I was thinking, wow, this is all working out, a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But the next day I had quite a lot of vertigo, not constant spinning, but I would have it fairly regularly. And I also found it really difficult. Even though I was lying in bed, it felt like I was moving and I could be anywhere. It was just very strange. So it took me a long time to recover. I also had something called, I think it's called oscillopia, and it's bouncing vision. So that was very difficult to cope with. So usually when you walk, your environment around you, even though you're moving, your environment stays still. But with bouncing vision, everything moves with you. So you're moving, your environment's moving all the time. And I did find that really difficult to cope with. My husband, who was looking after me, did some research, and he said, some people, they're left with that, but I wasn't. I had it for a little bit and then it just went away. Of course, I spoke to Dr. Fagan. He was very supportive, and he said, look, walk up and down a pool, like a program pool, and I did that, and I found that really helpful. So once I'd recovered from having the gentamicin, I went back to work, and I basically have not had another vertigo attack since then. However, I have had lingering effects. So, of course, my tinnitus is permanently there. And of course, I've lost the rest of the hearing on my right ear. But for a period of about probably 2 years after I had gentamicin, I had what's called mal de débarquement, which is that's something that people often get when they've been on a boat for a while. So you're on a boat, and when you get off the boat, you feel like you're still moving.
Mm.
So I was having that even though I had not been on a boat. So I would get these strange issues where I would feel like, even though, for example, I'd be on the train going to work in the city and the train would stop, but I would keep going because I could not tell that the movement had stopped. And, a couple of times I fell down the stairs, like, because I sort of got to the stairs to get off. And I also, once when we were flying back from Melbourne, the same thing happened. The plane had stopped. It had taxied into the airport. On the runway, it had stopped, but I felt the plane was still going. And I was actually really nauseated all the way home after that trip. So I was okay the next day. But it was little things like this that I guess, so even though, yes, I wasn't having these attacks where I was having to lie in bed for hours at a time because I basically couldn't move around, couldn't do anything, I was still having these other little issues that were happening. So having to get used to that was sort of a little bit difficult at first because I guess I had hoped that that was just going to be the end of it. The other thing that I'm left with is that at night, if it's totally dark, pitch black, I have no balance. I have no idea which way is up, down, sideways. So if I'm somewhere and it's totally black and I need to move, I usually crawl because that way I can feel the floor and I know where I'm going. And I'm more likely, if it even in darkness where there's, say, street lights on, I'm more likely to lose my balance because I rely very heavily on my eyes for my balance. So once you kind of take that away a bit, that makes it difficult for me. So I guess, as time has gone on, I think I've reached a pretty good stage where I feel confident. I continued working after that. I was, able to go and do things. I was able to drive without a problem. Whereas prior to that, there had been periods in my life where I had stopped driving altogether because I realised that it was just not a safe option for me. And the thing was that before I had gentamicin, so early on when I was having vertigo attacks quite frequently, I would be left often with side effects from the vertigo attacks. And so, for example, on one occasion, for a couple of days after a vertigo attack, I couldn't walk in a straight line. I would veer to the right. So, we made a joke about it. Look at this fun party trick I can do. Like, I can't walk in a straight line. But it really wasn't that funny when, you have these lingering side effects that you're left with. Another one was that after a vertigo attack, sometimes for a couple of days, if something moved in front of me, I would move with it. So, for example, I can remember hanging on to the pram because I was waiting at traffic lights and the traffic moving across me, I would want to move with it. So I would hang on to the pram so I could stay upright. And so little things like that sort of, they do make a difference to your life when you don't know how you're going to be and for how long. And I guess that brings me on to the other thing about Meniere's disease that's really difficult is that it does have an effect on your mental health, just your anxiety, your depression. I don't know how it could not, especially for people who are having really serious, really bad vertigo attacks, and they just don't know when it's ever going to end. I think just the uncertainty of your life And the fact that people can't see anything wrong with you. So when you're not, lying in bed vomiting, or, when you're not staggering around and people go, oh, she's drunk. And you're like, well, no, I'm not drunk. I can't walk. People think, well, you're normal. You look great. What's wrong with you? And they don't realize that, every time you go out, you're scared. What if I have a vertigo attack? Have I got something to be sick in? Have I got, does someone know where I'm going so that they can, get to me if they need to? It's things like that that make a real difference to your quality of life. And I think that's what, is really important in terms of the effects that Meniere's disease has on you. It's not just the vertigo and the vomiting and the hearing loss and the tinnitus. It's the fact that you can't really plan a life because you really don't know what's going to happen. And I found that for me, that was a really difficult thing, especially, I guess, because I had it when I was very young. So it wasn't as if I'd already had a few children or had a career or done things. I was sort of at the beginning of all of that. And it was like, well, how long's my employer going to put up with having to bring me home, because I've had another vertigo attack at work and I didn't have any warning. So I guess, that's one of the hardest things to deal with. But I am also thankful, which sounds really silly, but in a lot of ways, having Meniere's disease has been a good thing for me because as I couldn't eat, like I had to really have a low salt diet. And so I tended to eat a lot more fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. I couldn't drink alcohol. I can have 1 or 2 drinks maximum. Alcohol is a trigger for me. So I have to be really careful and make sure that I'm eating, that I'm drinking water, even when I have just that 1 or 2 drinks. So I guess for me, it's made me be healthier and be really aware of what I'm doing, what I'm putting into my body and how I'm treating my body. Am I getting enough rest? I do need to have enough sleep. It does make you more tired when you have to rely on your eyes for your balance. So I do need a lot of sleep. I find that really difficult, but yeah, so I guess I should probably stop because I think I was only supposed to talk for 5 or 10 minutes. So yes, I'm just glad that I can share my story with you, and I'm really happy to talk to anyone and to, there's a lot more I can tell you, but I can't talk about it all now. So I'm very happy. And if you've got any questions or things don't seem to make sense about anything I've said, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about it. So thanks for listening.